This is Stephanie Mann at safekidsnow.com, and today I am talking to
Helen Oseguera.
And Helen is a survivor, and she is going to tell us her story. Helen?
Yes. So my name is Helen Oseguera. I am a 65-year-old female who has lived through the hell on earth from child trafficking. I was 15 years old when I was trafficked. I was living on the streets and pimped out from 15 to 18. And the only reason I got out is because I put myself in jail on purpose to get away from the pimp.
How did you get in it in the first place?
Well, it was a boyfriend, supposedly. Mm-hmm. This is the way they do it. They finessed and I was 15, very impressionable. I had problems at home. I had a stepdad that was not very good. And then I had my mom who was an alcoholic. And I actually probably ran away more times than I can count from home. So, and that's when they pick up on you, is when they see that you're vulnerable, and they pick up on you when you're running away and when you're on the street, just to be a runaway. And I ended up getting involved with this guy that met me in a nightclub, because I used to sneak in into all the nightclubs in Hollywood, California. Mm. And he made me think that I was the love of his life, and I was only 15. But then I never looked 15.
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of 15-year-olds do not look 15.
Right.
Exactly. So what happened once you got into the sex life?
So basically, he had me in Hollywood walking the streets, and did all of the things that you do when you're hooking on the streets. And then he moved me from one area to another all the time. I was always on the move, and never really stayed in one place forever. Then we got into another place. They took me to a place that I was on Hollywood, and I remember Hollywood Boulevard one night, and this other guy came up out of nowhere and kidnapped me off the street.
Oh my goodness.
And took me to another place and did the same thing. He made me work for him. And then when the other guy found out, they did the battle of you have to pay me if you want to keep her, and blah, blah, blah. So that's what happened. And so basically what happened was I went back to the other guy because I didn't have any choice. And he kind of took me to another place. And then one day I remember I heard a knock on the door, and not knowing any better, because it was supposed to be a secure building at the time, and I opened the door and I got slugged in the face. And it started all over again. So I am basically, in that time frame, probably went from being beaten to being raped to being knifed, having a gun held to my head, been tied up, robbed, you name it. That was done to me.
You said you finally, at some point, escaped. Mm-hmm. So how did you escape from that nightmare?
So I was in Denver, Colorado, is where I was living, and that's where we were living.
So the pimp took you from Hollywood to...
Oh yeah, we went everywhere. We went everywhere in different places. But we were in Denver, Colorado at the time, and the pimp that I had, his name was William. I'll just say William at this point. He had me living in a part of Colorado. I did work the hotel scenes, and I worked the streets, but mostly from the hotels, because there wasn't a whole lot you could do in the wintertime other than work the hotels.
Didn't any of the hotel managers or anyone?
Nope, they were in on it.
They were in on it.
Yeah. So a lot of the hotel people, they would get paid to allow the girls to work in the bars, etc. And you have a lot of businessmen coming into the hotels there. And I'm not going to name the hotels because that would put me in trouble. But they actually kind of condoned it back then. They really didn't do much. And of course, the cops didn't do much either. Yeah. The funny part was, before I even went to Colorado, I actually got picked up for being a runaway, because my mom had filed a report finally after 2 years, and I got picked up for being a runaway in Hollywood, and that's why they moved me to Denver when I got back out. Because when I got back out, my stepdad threatened me, and I escaped out the bedroom window.
Why did he threaten you?
Because he was just one of those people that was very controlling. He was a drunk. He drank a lot. And I didn't like the fact that he was looking at me funny all the time. And I got worried that that's what it was. It was something that he was trying to push himself on me.
So did he know about your history with the
pimps? No, and I kind of say no and yes, because he kind of knew, but he didn't know, you know.
Okay.
But when I ran away that time, after they picked me up for runaway, they actually, they didn't look for me. So we went to Colorado, like I said, and I tried to get away from the guy that I was with in Colorado like several times, and he kept finding me, and I would hide out, in different places, and he would find me. And I remember one night he found me, and I got a beating like you wouldn't believe. But I cracked my teeth on the bottom, and I got a scar on my head from it. But they finally, what happened was I got picked up by the police one night, and they were going to charge me for prostitution. They didn't know I was underage, because, by the way, I had a fake ID. I had fake ID, fake birth certificate, fake social security card, everything. So when they took me to jail, I never said a word. I didn't tell them what I was or how old I was, nothing. And then they set a court date. Of course, he paid the bond to get me out. And so I got out, and then he took the bond money, and then my court date was coming up, just like several months later, and my court date was coming up. So I met this cab driver, his name was Joe, and he wanted to help me because he knew what I was going through, and he wanted to help me get out of the life. And he took me to his place where he lived, which was a horrible place, by the way. It was definitely the worst place I've ever lived in. And I lived off of oatmeal and blackberry jam. And that's all I had to eat for like months. And we went to, and the funny part is the cab yard was right outside his bedroom window. So I could see the cab yard. And every so often, here would come Bill's car coming around the corner. He was checking out the cab station. So somewhere along the line, he must have heard that I took off with this cab driver to get away from him. And I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. So then Joe said to me, well, why don't you go and go to court and turn yourself in? And that way, he can't look for you because you ran out on him on the bond money. He'll get his money back. And that way, you can get away from him. Well, I didn't know they were going to put me in prison.
Oh, wow.
And I was still underage. I was under 18, and I went to the women's prison in Denver. Or I don't know what part of Colorado that was in at the time. It was a long time ago. But I went to the court, and they sentenced me. I think it was 6 months or 7 months, something like that. And I was in there, and I never said a word about how old I was or what was going on.
Why didn't you say something?
I was scared.
Scared of who? Just the trafficker?
Just the persons in the prison, the girls. I didn't want to be taken advantage of. I had to show that I was bigger than I was and older than I was. I had to be more mature so they didn't, do anything to me. So that was my shield, is not saying anything. And then lo and behold, here comes one of his girls, and they found out where I was.
Wow.
Yeah, so one of his girls got put in jail with me, and she found out where I was, so she must have told him. So it was 2 days before my birthday to turn 18. And I started thinking about it. I was like, I wonder what they would do if I told them I was underage and I was in a women's prison and it wasn't even me. And I went to the CO that was at the desk, and I said, I have something to tell you. And she says, well, what is it? And they were pretty good to me. I didn't have a problem with them at that point. But I said, I'm underage. And she goes, what do you mean? I said, well, in 2 days is my birthday. I'll be officially 18. And she looked at me.
Whoa.
And the next thing I know, she's making phone calls and doing all other stuff. And I was out within a week.
Well, at that time, how long had you been in prison?
4.5 months.
Okay.
Yeah. So I told her that I was under 18, and then she was making phone calls, and then they let me make phone calls, and the only person I could get a hold of was my older sister. God rest her soul, she's gone now. And I got a hold of her, and the next thing I know, when they were telling me they were being released, they said they can't release me unless there's somebody to get me, because I was still underage considering that. And when I finally got out, I walked out of the jail, and there was my mom.
Whoa.
She took a bus all the way from California to Denver to get me because my stepdad wouldn't let her come get me.
Wow.
Yeah.
My goodness. That's quite a story. So let me ask you, what kind of advice do you give to mothers and their kids today?
Listen to your kid. The biggest thing that I had a problem with is not only my stepdad, but my mom was, like I said, she was also in the realm of alcoholism that was so bad that she didn't care about my sister and I, and that's another story altogether. But the experience alone that you got taken from your family without realizing what you were doing, because they glamorize what you do. They glamorize everything. Oh, we're going to get you the finest clothes and the finest jewelry, and we're going to take you out to the nicest restaurants, and everything's so honky-dory and blah, blah, blah. It's not. No. And then they drug you up. They give you alcohol. They give you drugs, the whole 9 yards, and you lose yourself. You lose yourself into the life completely. I mean, I had no idea that this was not my fault.
Wow.
You know, I was so gone by the time I reached 17, 18 years old. I didn't know what I was going to do. Even after I got out, I didn't know what I was going to do. But you know something? I was an alcoholic. I'm 18 years sober today.
Well, congratulations.
And I got sober after I saw what I was doing to myself and my own kids.
Wow.
So I broke the cycle. I decided that I was never going to ever let that happen to me again, any type of person do that to me again. And I tell you what, I have been single because of it, because I know what type of problems can happen when people are under the influence. And that's the number one thing I tell kids all the time, and my kids especially, because both of them are boys. And even if they're boys, I still kept them under lock and key pretty much, because I was afraid that something was going to happen to them.
Right.
You know, because whether you're a boy or a girl, it doesn't matter. You can still be trafficked, you know. And the whole thing was, my main thing was, I didn't want any abusers coming into my life and abuse my children. Even as boys, they're the most, and you know what? It's hard to say this, but boys are more getting abused more than girls sometimes, because they won't talk about it.
Yeah.
They won't say anything about it. And they think it's demasculating to them, and they think they're gay because of it. It's not. It's not your fault.
Right.
And let me tell you something. Kids today don't know that this thing right here is dangerous.
You're absolutely
Those
right.
computers are dangerous. Everything that we have in our life for our kids right now is a walking danger zone. And that's the honest to God's truth. Because I'll tell you what, I had to stay on even the video games. I had to stay on my boys like you wouldn't believe, because I would find out they were talking to adults in other states, and I'm like, who are you talking to? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm serious. You have to really be careful. And, you know, you see all these movies and all these different things. They try to glamorize it. It's not the way they think it is. The streets are not a good place. I witnessed a murder right in front of me.
Right.
You know, I've seen plenty of women beaten till they were bloody. You know, and I mean, I was there myself. And then on top of that, being able to recover from all that without being an alcoholic was the hardest thing in the whole world. And you know what saved my life when it comes to alcohol?
What saved your life?
My children.
Right.
And God. Because God said, you cannot do this anymore. You cannot do it anymore. And then I went to AA 3 times a day for 6 months. I went into rehab, because alcohol is the hardest thing to break. It's even harder to break than heroin and all the other drugs. And so after all of that, I went through a transition after going to many therapists. And I said, you know what? I need to seek something else. I need to seek God. And that's when I did. I got changed over from being in the position I was, the situation I was in when I was getting older, and I got sober. Now I'm 65. Now, if you think back, I only got sober 18 years ago. So I lived through hell from the time I got out of that situation till I was in my 40s and 50s. So it was a long time coming. But one thing that somebody told me one day, one of the therapists told me, it's not your fault.
No.
You did not do this.
Right.
It's the men that did this, the pedophiles that did this, the guys that bought and sold your wares are the problem. You were not the problem. And when he said that to me, because I had for days and years thought of shame, nothing but shame. And I thought to myself, why am I shaming myself if it's not my fault? So now I talk about it and I share it.
Yes.
Because there's no reason to be ashamed. You didn't do anything. It's not your fault.
You know, Helen, that's probably the most important message that we can share with other people. Mm-hmm. And one of the things you said really struck me, because everybody I have interviewed, and I've interviewed a lot of people, mm-hmm. have said it was God mm-hmm. that pulled them out of it, mm-hmm. that gave them the strength to do what they needed to do to get out of it. So I want to thank you so much for sharing that information. And I look forward to hearing more about your story at a future time.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
All right. Signing off, this is Stephanie Mann at safekidsnow.com.